I recently figured out Arcane's secret lighting process, and in this video I'm gonna show you exactly how to recreate it using Blender and Davinci Resolve.
How screwed up is this place? I used to say I could fix anything.
After an insane amount of requests, I'm finally doing this. I'm gonna walk you through Arcane's special compositing workflow, what render passes you need from your 3D software, and most importantly, the secret sauce. And after this video, you'll be surprised that the style of the bad guys, or even Spider-Verse, can also be recreated with these techniques. So with that, let's get into it.
Hi.
Before we get into all the crazy lighting stuff, let's quickly talk about the backgrounds. You've probably heard that the backgrounds in Arcane are fully painted. And that's true, including the lighting. So there are no real 3D lights in the scene, but everything is painted into the textures of the background. They utilize a technique called camera projection, where they can paint the whole background in 2D and then project it onto 3D geometry. If you want to learn more about that process, check out Lightning Boy Studio's video on that subject. So now we get to the main section of this video, Arcane's lighting process. If we were to add some lights in Blender, we get something like this. Oh hell no. Arcane uses a very different process to add lighting on their characters. All the magic happens in compositing. So generally that means we export some render passes from Blender and then combine them in a compositing software to achieve the final result. For compositing, you could really use any compositing software you like. I'd really recommend Blender's built-in compositor. You could also use After Effects or Nuke. I personally use Davinci Resolve's Fusion tab just because I got used to it. So let's cut the chase. Let me give you a quick rundown of the first technique so you understand where we're going with this. We have a texture pass and we have a lighting pass. The texture pass includes just the colors of our model, and the lighting pass all the pure lighting information. Now what we're gonna do is use the brightness values of the lighting pass to reveal certain color adjustments. For example, let's say we have this base color and now we're gonna create a new color adjustment, and let's say we're just gonna make it darker. Now this will be our shadow color. And now by using all the dark parts of the lighting render, we're gonna cut out the shadow color and merge it on top of the base color. So that way we've added a simple shadow. Now remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is much more to it than it first seems like, which we'll go through in this second half of the video. But now that you understand the general idea of what we're going for, let's start in the beginning step by step. First of all, which render passes do we need exactly?
The way to light it's different, but it's so simple. When you know the trick, you say, so simple.
Exactly, it's so simple. Let's take a look at what they show right here. They first show a typical texture pass. All we have to do here is jump in the shader editor and directly connect the texture to the material output. That way you'll only render out the pure texture of your model without any lighting. Then, if we go a bit further, we can see a lighting pass. Now there are many ways to reproduce this, but here's one that is very beginner friendly. For the character, we'll replace all the materials with a simple diffuse shader. No textures applied, just a white base color. Now let's add a sunlight. I slightly increase the strength and the angle of this sunlight. Next we go to the world settings and turn the strength down to 0. That way there is no extra light coming from the sky. And lastly, let's change one setting in the render properties. Under light paths, turn the total number of light bounces down to 0. So now all that's left in our scene is the pure direct lighting information. Let's get back to the making of. If we go a bit further, we can see another lighting pass. In this case, the light comes from behind the character, slightly angled to the right. Actually, throughout the whole making of, we can see the use of these lighting passes. So what can we do with them, and why are they so important? Well, let me show you. This is Davinci Resolve's Fusion tab, and it lets you composite with nodes. If you have no experience with nodes, I'll leave some links in the description, but don't worry, it's actually pretty simple. With Shift Space, we can bring in any node we need. Let's first search for the loader node, and then just hit Enter. Here we're gonna search for our texture pass, and then just double click the image sequence. And now as you can see, our texture pass has been imported as a node. We can preview it by hitting either 1 or 2 for the first or second viewer. Now for this tutorial, I'm going to show you the final composite in the first viewer, but anytime I want to preview one specific node, I'll show it in the second viewer, just so there is no confusion. But for now, I'm just going to expand this. Let's also bring in our background render as a lighting reference. Now you might realize that we don't have any layers. So how are we supposed to merge our texture pass on top of our background? We can do that with a simple merge node. The merge node is going to be the most complicated one we're going to cover today, and even that is really simple. The yellow socket is the background input, and the green one is the foreground input. So let's drag our background into the background and our character into the foreground. Now if we preview this merge node by hitting 1, we can see we've just merged our character on top of our background. Easy, right? Now let's drag it down a little, so we can do all our character adjustments here before they get merged on top of the background. Now the first thing I'm gonna do is color adjust the character to match the background better. So let's hit Shift Space and bring in a color corrector node. If we hold down Shift and drag it in here, it connects into the stream. So now if we follow the stream, we can see our texture pass gets color corrected and then it gets merged on top of the background. So the color correction will only affect our character because the background merging happens later. I'm gonna make the character slightly more blue and more dark. And now as you can see, it already fits the tone much better. I'm gonna call this result the base color. So now to the most complicated but also most important part of the whole process. We're gonna add a shadow. First of all, let's import our lighting render. Our lighting render looks like this. Now I'm previewing this in the second viewer, and as you can see, all the shadows are black and everywhere the light hits, it gets white. So now I'm gonna bring in a merge node once again and connect it into the stream. And now before we connect anything, let's create our shadow color. We simply bring in another color correction node and plug the base color into that color correction. Now this will be our shadow color, so let's make it quite a bit darker. And now we can connect everything. So the base color is already connected into the yellow background input. Let's connect our shadow color into the green foreground input. Now into the blue input we can plug in a mask that lets us control where the foreground input appears. So in this case we will just plug in our lighting render. Now nothing has happened yet, so let's select the merge node, go into the merge node settings and then switch the channel from alpha to luminance. That way it actually uses the luminance, aka the brightness values of our lighting render. Now we can see something has changed, but right now it uses the bright parts to reveal the shadow color. We want the exact opposite. We want it to appear in only the dark parts. So all we have to do is go back into the merge node and click Apply Mask Inverted. So now it uses the dark parts of the lighting render to reveal our shadow color. And as you can see, we've added a simple shadow. Here you can play around with any color adjustment you like to get the exact look you're going for. And it's only gonna get easier from here.
So wait, am I saying that all the shadows we see in Arcane are just the base texture that was simply color adjusted to be a bit darker? So no real 3D shadows, but just manually tweaked values?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Take a look. Because of this technique, we simplify a lot of data. We don't get any ambient occlusion, specular highlights, or bounce lighting from the environment. And that's exactly the effect we see in Arcane. Now before moving on to the secret sauce, let's clear up some stuff. You might be a bit overwhelmed. Me as well. You might be a bit overwhelmed, but let me actually show you how easy this is. 99% of the shots in Arcane have the exact same lighting structure. We start out with the base color, then we add the shadow, and then the rim lights. And this 3-layer lighting structure is everywhere. It's always base color, shadow, rim lights. Base color, shadow, rim lights. Fuck me. We've just discussed how to add a shadow, but for the rim lights it's actually even more simple. So instead of color correcting our texture pass, we're just gonna bring in a solid color. This color will be the color of the rim light. Then we're gonna bring in our rim light render, And again, use the brightness values to cut out the solid color and merge it on top of the rest. And this is super quickly done. We're gonna bring in a merge node. We bring in the rim light render. And now we need a solid color. Here it's called the background node. Don't get confused by the name, it's not supposed to be a background. It's literally just a solid color. I'm gonna make this a nice bright yellow. Now the solid color goes into the foreground input, the rim light into the blue mask input. And now go into the merge node settings and change the channel from alpha to luminance. And as you can see, it already works. Now you could also go back to this tab and change the blending mode to something like linear dodge, so it blends in nicer. And that's it. Another great thing about this technique is that we can manipulate our lighting render however we want to. We could, for example, add some curves adjustments to make the lighting more sharp. This also kind of flattens the lighting render and adds another important layer of the 2D stylized feel. It's also something we always see in Arcane. No matter the condition, the light is mostly super sharp. Here is another example. Even here, where the lighting seems to be very soft, we can clearly see this hard edge. But wait, how could that be? How can we feel soft lighting even though we see hard edges in the shadows? Just in case you don't understand the issue here, usually soft lighting makes soft shadows. But that's something we never see in Arcane. But then again, when you think of hard lighting, you wouldn't think of this. Like, it feels soft and we see soft gradients from light to dark. But then we simultaneously have hard shadows. So what's going on here? Like, you know what I mean? This is super paradoxical. There must be some kind of secret sauce.
I'm breaking into Fortiche right now. Oh my god.
Masks! Let me explain from the beginning. So as we know, our lighting render dictates where the base color is and where the shadow color is. In this case, everything black is the shadow color and everything white is the base color. And remember, our lighting render is just a black and white image. Now we take a solid black color, cut a part of it out with a mask, blur it slightly, and then merge it on top of the lighting render. This has created a dark spot wherever our mask is. Now that means that our shadow color will also show up in the part where we've created that mask. We can also control how visible this adjustment is just by changing the opacity of the mask. And we can also apply this technique the other way around. If we merge a white color on top of our lighting render, it will essentially bring back our base color. That is the basic explanation of this technique. Now don't underestimate this. These masks make a huge difference. They allow us to really craft the whole composition. This process is super artistically driven and we literally go, let's add a bit more of the shadow here and let's slightly bring back the base color in those parts. And I get it, you might be skeptical and this seems super unprofessional to just draw random masks around the character and you're just like, what the hell man, this is stupid.
Stupid.
And yes, you're right, this technique completely breaks physics and theoretically doesn't make sense at all. But here's why it works so surprisingly well. You see, this isn't a new technique. It's really commonly used in anime. There, every shadow you see is hand-drawn, and they rely on these masks and gradients to make the lighting more understandable and cinematic. But now Arcane uses these same techniques in their 3D animations. That's why they intentionally make their lighting hard to get that cel-shaded anime aesthetic. And on top of that, they use the same mask and gradient techniques. As far as I know, this was never seen in 3D before, at least not to that extent. And that's what makes Arcane Style so iconic. The lighting is essentially a combination of 3D rendered lights and 2D placed masks, which enhances the concept of mixing 2D and 3D even further. And that's what makes it look super surreal and so handcrafted. So when you think about it, it isn't stupid at all. It's freaking genius. Now we can't just randomly apply these masks anywhere we want. So before we jump into our project file, let's quickly analyze some shots from Arcane. So as we know, our character is split into the base color and the shadow color. So everywhere we see the base color, it should generally stay at the same brightness, right? Right? But now if we take a look at Arcane, we can see that the more we get into the shadow side, the more we can see the base color gets darker. And that is because we have a very soft gradient that slowly brings in the shadow color the further we get away from the light source. And here again, the parts where we see the base color transition more and more into the shadow color, the more we get to the right side. So how do you get this effect? Well, by using soft masks, we can edit our lighting render to look something like this. And as you know, the darker the lighting render gets, the more of the shadow color gets revealed. So that way this hard edge isn't so sudden anymore, and the lighting feels way more soft. And this is usually how you use these masks. The initial goal is to make the lighting more soft and improve the overall composition. Here is another example. On the bottom of the character, there's a very soft gradient that slowly fades in the shadow color. And this is actually a super common gradient since it emulates the natural ambient light from above. But sometimes you can use these masks for other purposes, like for example here. In this shot we can see a mask being used to blend between two different versions of the base color. One a bit more red and one a bit more blue. By creating all these masks manually, the artist literally shapes how they want the light to be and really guides the viewer's attention to the focal point, which most often is the face. And this is also what I meant earlier with having a super hard shadow but still getting that soft lighting effect. Because with these masks, you can make this hard edge not feel as hard. And that is the critical effect we need to achieve the Arcane style. So let me show you how to do it. So now let's finally get into the technical aspect. It's actually pretty simple. Just as a reminder, this is the base color, this is the shadow color, and this is the lighting render, which tells the merge node where to reveal the shadow color. So now we can make any changes we want to this lighting render, as long as the final output connects to this mask socket. Let's start with some curves adjustments to make this edge a bit sharper. And now let's add a mask. For that I'm gonna put a merge node right here. Now we need a background node which gives us a solid black color and connect it into the foreground. And now we're gonna take a polygon node and connect it into the blue mask input of the merge node. For this one I'm gonna create a soft mask on the bottom of the character. And as you can see, it fades in the shadow color. Let's increase the soft edge slider. And in the merge node, we can decrease this blend slider to decrease the opacity of the mask. And that is everything you need to know. So this is how my final project file looks like. If we zoom in, I've used the mask to blend between two different base colors. One is dark and blue, and the other is more warm and brighter. Now for the actual shadow, I'm gonna preview the lighting render so you can see all the adjustments getting made before it gets used as a mask. First, I've added this mask that darkens the bottom of the character. Then another one to further define the shape of the face. Another one for the hair. And then I've used a mask that merges a white color on top, essentially removing some of the shadow from the face. And now this is the final result, before the masks and after. Nice! And these techniques are also used in many other animated pieces. Valorant and League of Legends cinematics are basically the exact same. But even in less similar ones, like the bad guys, they make use of these techniques. For example, the rim lights look like they were made the exact same way, because they have the same 2D flattened look to them. And they also seem to use masks and gradients to darken certain sections of their characters. And even Spider-Verse can be recreated with these techniques. We can render out a rim light and manipulate it in a way so it shows halftones. And then we use these brightness values to reveal a solid color. And the same thing for the hatching.
You gotta tell them I can do this.
So that's it. The two main techniques Arcane uses is the lighting render technique as a base of everything, and then they manually add masks to further define how the lighting is shaped and add way more depth and composition to the image. And now, since you know the secrets, you can tell that it's not some mysterious filter, but actually a super straightforward way of doing it with the most basic tools.
It's not magical trick, it's just artists and people who are doing beautiful things.
And this is exactly what these techniques are. We can really put in the colors and values we want, disconnecting it from reality and actually showing what we want to express. And that is what makes Arcane so special and so unbelievably inspiring. So with that, let's finish this. Here's a quick way to level up your shot. I brighten up the eyes to make them stand out more. If you take a look at Arcane, they also do this. The eyes should be way darker in this shot, but they are freaking glowing. And now we're fully done with our character, and we just have to do a few more effects to the background and the whole image. First of all, some haze and glows in the background to add more depth. And then some final lens effects like lens blur, motion blur, chromatic aberration, some grain, and finally a lens flare, a vignette, and a little bit of exposure flicker to add that natural camera feel. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me show you what we've created. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've learned something new. I have some crazy projects planned that I'm super excited to share with you guys. So if you don't want to miss out, feel free to subscribe. Love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Secret sauce. Fuck me.